Dear listeners, let's get to know each other even better. Please write your name and let us know if you're a subscriber to our channel. Also, share what you like and what you don't like about our channel. Thank you. Here I was, 50 years old and in college, a significant life change I never intended. Life has a way of bouncing you around like a pinball when it takes the urge. I had a good job in middle management with a company that had employed me for nearly 30 years. Then the economy tanked and dragged us down with it. In 18 months, we had downsized by 60%. Suddenly, there was a surplus of older middle managers, and I was out. I saw it coming but didn't say anything to Cathy, my second wife, because I didn't want her to worry. She had her own problems. She owned a small real estate company. She did really well during the good years, but the last few had been a struggle. She averaged one sale every 2 months and told me that was a lot better than many of her competitors. When the axe fell, I wasn't surprised. The parachute wasn't gold, more like copper, but it was still more than I expected. I hung around until noon on my last day, mostly saying goodbye, until I couldn't take another handshake or hug. Despite being unemployed, we weren't in bad shape. The house was paid for, as were 2 of our cars, my motorcycle and her sailboat. She grew up sailing, but I got queasy out of sight of land, so I didn't go with her much. Her friend Barb also loved to sail, so she had a sailing partner. It was at the marina on a nearby lake that I decided to surprise Cathy and take her to a nice lunch to soften the news. She had 3 showings that day, the most she had in months. She was bubbling the night before, saying, "Things are getting better, babe. I can feel it." She wasn't at the first house I checked, but I found her car at her most expensive listing, a 4,000s estate with an equestrian gym in the basement, a huge kitchen, and an Olympic-sized swimming pool. Her commission would be very nice. She turned her phone off when she was with a client, so I hadn't bothered to call. I eased the door open slowly so as not to disturb her. I just caught her eye and nodded my head, then waited outside. We had done it before. Counter, and Cathy, my beloved wife, was having a conversation with him. The guy was talking about the property and how impressed he was with it. She smiled back at him and continued to discuss the features of the house. He seemed very interested in making a decision and said he would definitely consider purchasing the place. I was so shocked I just stood there for a second, then took my phone out and started recording. I got some good video of the last part of the conversation. When I had enough, I let my rage explode. They still hadn't seen me, so I angled until I could come up behind him. Cathy wouldn't be able to see me over the counter. I grabbed his collar and yanked him over the island, hitting him as hard as I could, catching him on the ear, which caused him to bleed. "What the hell?" He managed to yell as he went down. He instinctively covered up, so I kicked him in the stomach and ribs a couple of times before he managed to roll over. I kicked him a few more times before getting on top of him and landing a few elbows on his head. He was going to have some serious bruises. Cathy finally popped up. I stopped kicking him and snapped a few more pictures before starting around the island. Her eyes were huge. "Run!" I screamed in rage. She took off, leaving her blouse open. I heard that Mustang she was so proud of burning rubber a few seconds later. The guy was still down, moaning. When I bent over, he started begging me not to hit him again. I reached into his pocket, took his wallet, and removed his license. "You'll get this back when I make a copy. I'll need to know where to find you for court," I said. He started begging, "Please, they'll lose my family," and added, "I'm not the first. My friend told me about her." I couldn't believe it, but it didn't take much for him to talk. I got him to give me his friend's name, telling him that if he was lying, his wife would get a very interesting set of pictures. I never talked to her again except in court. She sent me a long letter that I let lie around for almost a year before I worked up enough interest to read it. She was sorry. She didn't mean to do it, and she did it to save her business. I stopped reading after the first page and threw it away, not caring what the next 6 pages were about. I tried to keep it civil until she realized I wasn't coming back and turned into a different person. We met with her lawyer, and until then I had kept the photos out of it. I gave him a set, telling him to inform her that if she fights me, these go public. He wasn't the first. I tracked down 2 more men who experienced her sales techniques. This is still an alienation of affection state. The wives could bury her with lawsuits. It'll all come out in court. She'll most likely lose her real estate license, and if she doesn't, no one in this area would ever consider hiring her. The deal wasn't that bad. This was her only chance. I wanted a decision by the end of the day. He called back 5 minutes before the deadline. It was tough for her, but she really didn't have a choice. I would never live in my house again, so she had to buy me out or put it on the market. She nearly blew a gasket when I let her know that if it went up for sale, I refused to let her handle it. To top it off, she had to sell her sailboat and the Mustang to raise the money to buy my half. Despite keeping it quiet, rumors circulated, and she soon had a very hard time getting listings. Too bad. I moved away when the divorce was final. There was nothing holding me there. I found a nice place, a foreclosure. Thanks to Cathy, I knew a good bit about real estate and got a really good deal in a rural setting. It was a 3-bedroom house with 9 acres. There were several outbuildings, even a small barn. Way more than I needed, but such a good deal I couldn't resist. Besides, if I held it for a few years and decided to sell, I could probably make a nice profit. My employment counselor laid it out for me. This is an even tighter market than the one you moved away from, and your lack of a degree is holding you back. We have a program you should take advantage of. You've got enough credits from when you left college that you only need about 1.5 years to get your degree. It's been a while, so you'll have to audit a few classes, but you could still be done in less than 2 years. The program pays for the books and tuition, and you still get full benefits. What did I have to lose? I went to a community college that had a deal with a university where I could take their classes and still get a 4-year degree. One thing I liked was that half the students were older, either unemployed like me or going part-time to better their lives. I made a few friends. College is a target-rich environment, and I dated often, meeting people who were as young or younger than my 2 sons from my first marriage. I caught my ex-wife cheating too. Luckily, the boys were in their middle teens, and it didn't hurt as much as it would have when they were younger. She moved halfway across the country, and I only saw them during the summer and winter holidays, but we still had a good relationship. I was having a good time but wasn't looking for another life partner. Been there, done that twice. Done with it. I needed 1 more semester to get my degree, and was taking some fairly advanced classes. I was in a workshop designed to encourage small businesses. It would be good for me. I was leaning toward some type of franchise, as the idea of being my own boss appealed to me. We had gone over the material, and our final assignment was to create and market our own fictional business. Our instructor put together 2-person teams, trying to match people who were least likely to have anything in common, claiming it heightened creativity. My partner was a fashion major, about 20 years old, smart enough, but lacking any real-world experience. We eyed each other warily. I invited her and 3 other teams out to my house for a brainstorming session. The instructor encouraged it, saying it would expand our horizons. I ordered pizza, and we shared ideas until our heads hurt, but we still hadn't come up with anything of real merit, so we stopped trying. It was a Friday night, so we began drinking in earnest. I took the keys away. A couple of spouses showed up to pick up their less-than-sober partners, and I tried to get the rest situated. Gail, my partner, hadn't had a lot to drink, so she helped me. Between air mattresses, the fold-out couch, and the 2 spare bedrooms, we had everything situated, and we sat down for a second. While I was listening to her give me some fashion history, she said, "It's all about exposure and branding. You're probably old enough to remember members-only jackets. They were cheap and ill-made, but they made a fortune for somebody." I grimaced, trying to remember if I still had mine. "And what about those shirts with the long tail? They were marketed toward tennis players and were a complete flop. They were about to be discontinued until a professional golfer wore one that a friend had given him. Suddenly, they were very popular. She sighed. It's all about finding the right niche and a good marketing strategy. Combine it with an appealing product, and you're laughing all the way to the bank. I was eyeing Jamie and his girlfriend Alice as they snuggled together on the fold-out couch. He was an agribusiness major, and she was in the nursing program, both about 30 pounds overweight and clearly in love. Yeah, about the only group not targeted is rednecks. How does redneck chick sound? She said, giggling. We'd have to brand them, though. I was looking at his sweatshirt that said Aeropostale. How about a raccoon? She said, snorting with laughter. Alice had rolled over, and we could see her broad back. Yeah, and we could have a line of jeans called Lard Duds. We laughed back and forth for a while, until she went into her bedroom for the night. The first thing I thought of when I woke up was the conversation from the night before. I had our fake business idea. My administrative and marketing skills would complement her fashion savvy and production skills. I made a pot of coffee, and Gail helped me with breakfast. Soon the ones fit to eat a meal were up, while the others drank coffee and juice, moaning about their hangovers. I asked Gail to stay behind when everyone left and outline my idea. She grinned broadly. I've been thinking along the same lines. She designed a logo of a cute raccoon and showed it to me. I frowned. Something's missing. I got it. I yelled a few minutes later. She needs wings. After all, it's Air Raccoon. She agreed, making adjustments, and it looked much better. She designed the Lard Duds logo with the letters shaped like two large cheeks in pink. It would be small and on the right rear pocket. We had the design, the business plan, and the marketing strategy. It was time to implement. I thought the product had real possibilities. Gail had no money, but she had talent. She would be in charge of the actual manufacturing, while I could handle everything else. I asked her one night after we were done working, Gail, you know what would look better than the computer graphics? A real product. What do we need to accomplish that? She obviously had been thinking about it too. For the shirts and caps, we would need a professional programmable monogram machine. How much would that cost? I asked. Depending on the amount of thread it can handle and the speed it operates at, you could spend tens of thousands. Melco and Brother make really good machines in the mid-price range, going from $7,000 to $15,000 new. You can look around and get a good used one for half that, especially if you find someone going out of business and trying to unload equipment. Wow, that's a bit more than I thought, I said. Still, it would give us a reasonable starting point. Gail, I have a proposition for you. Let's really do it. I have some money I'd be willing to spend to start us up. You handle design and manufacturing, and I'll handle everything else. Think about it. She did, for about 30 seconds. I got a lawyer, told him what I wanted, what I thought was fair, and turned him loose. He called us into a meeting and laid it out for us. The company name would be Redneck Chick Clothing Company, and Air Raccoon was trademarked to me. Gail got the Lard Duds trademark. Since I was putting up all the money and paying the bills until we turned a profit, I got 65%, and Gail got 35%. She didn't like the split but came around and signed, knowing full well I could replace her and own it all. We got lucky and found a used Melco machine. The owner was desperate to sell, and we picked it up for $4,000 instead of the $12,000 new price. Having it delivered to my garage, we paid a company representative to come in for a one-day training seminar, hinting that if this worked out, we might buy more. Gail was like a kid at Christmas. We went out and bought 6 dozen assorted t-shirts, 3 dozen men's and 3 dozen women's. The men's were black and dark red, while the women's were pink, yellow, and light gray, all sizes large to 3X. We also bought 2 dozen black and white men's hats and 2 dozen for the women in pink or white. It took her half a day to program our logo through trial and error, but it came out exactly like we wanted. Soon, all 16 needles were working, creating our design. We made the logo small but noticeable, small because the threads we used were expensive. It was a blend of grays, white, silver, and black, with the wings being all silver. She had programmed it so they had a gossamer look. We got Alice, Jamie, and 4 of their friends, all big people, to model our product for our presentation. Gail insisted we get an overlock machine for her to sew the prototype jeans. It was nowhere near as expensive as the monogrammer. We even got some of the guys from the television and radio program to do a commercial for us. It showed Alice in the work version of the jeans, wearing our shirt and hat, helping Jamie around the farm. Later on, she wore the dressier version with a pink-colored shirt featuring the Air Raccoon logo prominently on the pocket. She looked confident and engaging, smiling at the camera while her voice did the overlay. Lard duds jeans. Definitely not for little girls. The instructor was stunned. We aced the course. More importantly, we started receiving requests for our product, building up quite a following locally. I had definite ideas about the business, as did Gail. We didn't always agree, but we found common ground on many issues. I had a metal building on my property, 48 by 36. We applied for a zoning waiver as a cottage industry and got it. We remodeled the building, insulating it, adding a heat pump, building a 2-stall bathroom and a small break room, and then installed 12 brand new Melco machines. We advertised for employees and were lucky. There had been a large textile presence in the area, and many skilled sewers were available. There were 900 applicants for the 12 positions. We carefully screened them, making them actually use the machine before we considered them. Most were hesitant, having never used that type of machine before. The ones that showed promise we set aside for consideration. In a week, we had 11 hires. I brought on the last one without Gail's approval. She showed up unannounced without an application. I heard there were some sewing jobs available, she said. I looked her over. She was overweight and appeared to be in her 60s. I thought I'd talk to her, let her off easy, and send her on her way. Do you have any experience? I asked. All I've ever been is a sewer. I started out when I was 13, 50 years ago. I've sewn shirts, upholstery, leather, sails, and mattress covers. If you can get a needle through it, I can sew it. She paused to draw breath. I need this job, mister. My husband died last year. He was never much for saving, and I've got 2 grandbabies I'm helping raise. My unemployment is on its last emergency waiver. I'll have to go on welfare, something I swore I'd never do. I've never missed a day of work in my life, except when I had my babies. Please, mister. I could see the tears shimmering in her eyes. Do you know anything about this type of machine? It's not actually sewing. We monogram pre-made shirts and hats right now. Not a thing, but if it uses needle and thread, I'll figure it out. I held out my hand. Can you be here Saturday around 9? I'll have my partner give you a little training. The tears flowed unchecked as she shook my hand. I'll be here. Thank you, mister. You won't regret it. She turned to leave, and I stopped her. A couple of things you need to know. There are only going to be a dozen of us, and I'm not a real formal kind of guy. I expect you to call me by my given name. It's Zachariah, but I prefer Zach. And if you're going to work with me, it'd be nice if I knew your name. She put her hand to her mouth in embarrassment. Mavis Davis Turner. God bless you, Zachariah. For all the years I knew her, she never called me Zach. Gail wasn't too happy when I told her about the hire, but was very impressed with how quickly Mavis mastered the basics. In 3 hours, we decided to pay the team minimum wage plus production. If they could operate the machines at 80%, they averaged $9 an hour. Not a fortune, but better than unemployment. We were too small to offer insurance right now, but I worked out a deal that allowed them 4 doctor visits a year for $20, plus up to 3 generic prescriptions paid for. I knew it wasn't much, but I at least made an effort. The women seemed to appreciate it. Most were middle-aged relics of the textile trade. Mavis became the unofficial floor manager, acting as a grandmother and cheerleader. The first thing I had each employee do was make a shirt in all 5 colors with their names monogrammed on them. That became the uniform. Monday was red, Tuesday was blue, and so on. They appreciated it and became walking billboards in the community. They worked 9 hours a day from Monday through Thursday and 4 hours on Friday. If we were behind, which was almost all the time, they could work all day on Friday, but never on Saturday. Most took advantage of the overtime, unless they had family commitments. Employees received a party on their birthday and could take a day off with pay or opt for extra money. We always made sure to give them a nice gift. Mavis got a 19-inch flat screen with a Blu-ray player and a year of Netflix paid for. She was so grateful that she cried for an hour before she finally gave up and went home. Gail grumbled a little, saying that money was starting to blind her. We continued like this for a year, adding a mini shift with college kids working 4 hours a night 5 days a week and Saturdays. Yet we still couldn't keep up. We had made the spare bedrooms into offices. Finally, I walked into Gail's office and flopped down on her couch. I'm exhausted. We need to expand, take it to the next level. Plan on doing nothing next week, but looking for a larger facility. How big? She asked, trying to keep the excitement out of her voice. I had been going over figures and projections for a month. Big enough to hold 100 machines minimum, plus room for you to add your jeans line. We may have to look at 2 buildings. She jumped over the desk and hugged me, scattering papers everywhere. She was never the neatest person. Gail had been grumbling because we had been tied up with the shirts and caps and hadn't had the time or the opportunity to develop the jeans line. It was time. We found a pretty nice facility at a reasonable rate. We planned to bring in the new machines 25 at a time and get them up and running, expecting to be done in a year. There was a smaller building nearby within walking distance that we leased. Gail shopped for overlock sewing machines. She planned to start with 20 and go from there. The operation had gotten too big for us. We were working 16-hour days and making mistakes. We needed a plant manager, a production manager, an office manager, an HR department, a controller, and an in-house accountant to keep costs under control. We ran ads in the paper and trade magazines. Our original group heard about the expansion and got nervous. They liked the informal setting and didn't want to change. I didn't either. I trusted them and wanted to use them as our experimental shop. We held a little meeting. First, we're not moving you. You might find yourself doing different things, but your jobs aren't in danger. I'll be in my home office half the time, so you'll still see me. We need a manager, and I'm pleased to announce Mrs. Mavis Turner will take over the day-to-day operation, effective Monday. There were actually some cheers and clapping. Mavis was pretty sharp and handled a lot of floor problems before they got to me or Gail. She was a natural leader. It shook her at first that anyone would have that much confidence in her. She needed a little convincing, but when I doubled her base pay, she came on board. I also gave everyone a bonus check, 2 weeks' pay as a thank you. Gail objected, saying I was babying them and giving them unreasonable expectations. I'm investing in the future. You can't put too high a price on loyalty. Of the original 12, 10 are still with us. One had to quit when her husband got sick, and they moved, and the other just didn't work out. Every woman out there could unlock those doors, go to work alone, and still maintain her productivity. How many employers have that much trust in their people? You reap what you sow, Gail. Get it? I thought it was funny, but she hadn't smiled. We finally got our branding break from Mavis, of all people. Her great-nephew drove race cars and had just moved from ARCA to the Busch Series. It was kind of like going from single A to triple A in baseball, with NASCAR being the majors. A lot of NASCAR drivers still ran in the Busch Series, but there weren't many black racers on the stock car circuit. Mavis came to me, all excited one day. "Zachariah, my nephew is coming for a visit. Can I have Friday off?" She had never asked for time off, so I had no problem granting it. I might bring him by. The girls have never met a real race car driver before. My ears perked up. What's more associated with racing than rednecks? Nothing. I saw a golden opportunity. I tell you what, Mavis, I'll give you the day off with pay if you'll bring him by at lunchtime. I'll spring for lunch for everybody if I can have a few minutes alone with him. That suited her just fine. I went back into the office and did a search. He was an excellent driver with a good record on and off the track. Married with one child, and I was pleased to see his wife was a little on the plus side. Mavis brought him in, bursting with pride. He was personable, had everyone smiling, posed for endless photos, and laughed and joked while he ate lunch, making a dozen dedicated fans that day. I finally got him alone in my office. How'd you get into racing? My dad was a shade tree mechanic who ran the dirt track, some as a driver. Pretty good too, but he liked making cars go fast more than driving them. I started out at 10, racing go-karts. When I was 15, I was driving on dirt tracks in little 4-cylinder cars. Not to brag, but I was good. I graduated to the ARCA series, and this season I'll be in the Busch series, running with the big dogs. Impressive resume. How do you think you'll do? If the sponsorship comes through, I should do all right. We're operating on a shoestring right now. I sat back and grinned. All right, let's stop dancing around. My company is in the same phase of life as you. Getting better, but not quite there yet. Send me some figures. Let me see how much it's going to cost us to paint a raccoon on your car. In the meantime, how about doing some ads for us? You and your wife. We'll pay you the going rate your popularity warrants as endorsers. If the sponsorship thing happens, we can work that into the contract. Think about it. Talk to your people, and let me know. Regardless, good luck on your season. I wasn't in over my head and knew it. We had gotten too big too fast. I dropped around to see my old professor, the one who started me on this path. He was happy to see me, and even had me come to one of his classes so he could tote me as one of his success stories. It was kind of embarrassing. Later, over coffee, I hit him with why I came. Is it true you're retiring after this semester? Yes, I'll miss it, but I put my time in. I'll take my retirement and look around, maybe do some consulting work. I grinned at him. No, you won't. You'll be taking your new job as vice president in charge of development at the redneck chic clothing company. He sat, coffee halfway to his lips, in shock. Are you serious? You bet I am. I need help with your contacts in the academic and business world. You're perfect for this job. I want you to put together a team as soon as possible. We'll talk later, but I'm sure Gail and I can make it appropriate. I had talked to Gail, and she was on board with it. Then again, she was so consumed with the jeans factory setup that she would have agreed to just about anything. We got lucky with a few employees. My oldest son had just gotten downsized, and he was an accountant by training. I offered him the job of controller, and he jumped at the chance. He soon arrived with his new bride, who was 4 months pregnant. They hadn't told me. She needed a job, so I hired her as my personal assistant. I leased a house for them out of my personal accounts as a signing bonus for a year. I was hoping by then they would be ready to buy. Gail brought a woman by to talk to me. It was her aunt, a very attractive woman, 46 but looking 36, with long black hair and dark, smoky eyes. She was tall at 5'7", and you could tell she worked out regularly. The only way to describe her was professional, yet stylishly dressed. I realized Gail was still talking and tuned back in, even though she is my aunt. I just nodded, and Gail smiled, apparently indicating I had just hired her as office manager. You won't be sorry, she said, shaking my hand. I hope not. Even if she wasn't very competent, it would at least add to the team. I know, sexist pig, get over it. I had to look at the resume she had shoved into my hand just before she left. Her name was Amaryllis, Apparently, her mother was a big flower fan. There was a note saying she preferred to be called Amy and that she was very skilled. We got my youngest son to join us. He had a degree in materials management and warehousing. We hadn't needed a warehouse yet because as soon as the product was finished, it was shipped, but new, bigger things were coming. We held a meeting with Gail, Amy, Ralph, my old professor, Barry, our lawyer, Greg, my oldest son, and Jerry, my youngest. This was the team that was going to take us national. There was a lot of ground to cover, and a chain of command had to be established. We decided I would be CEO. Gail would be vice president in charge of the jeans division, and Ralph would be managing director of the t-shirt plant, among other things. Greg and Amy would head the office staff, and Jerry would look into streamlining our handling of material and any warehouse issues we might have in the future. Debbie, Greg's wife, a pretty smart cookie in her own right, would assist me on my expansion projects. Salaries were hashed out. Ralph, Gail, and I would get company cars and a few minor perks. There would be no ownership options, but there would be profit sharing. It was a bit rough, but I was sure over the coming months we could tweak it. Where was all this money coming from? We couldn't get the product out fast enough. Our first 25 machines came online, and we were actually ahead of schedule for about 4 days. We didn't have a plant manager yet, but I brought one of the women from the original group in to head the section. Betty wasn't Mavis, but she was fair and kept efficiency up. I gave her the same pay I had given Mavis. Barry was after us to incorporate and maybe go public in a few years. I wasn't keen on the idea. One of the things I hated about our business was that we didn't actually make the shirts. They were decent quality but foreign made and leaked completely. We had been having a little trouble with the suppliers. Jerry came to see me. "Pop, how do you feel about using foreign-made shirts?" "It sucks, but what can I do about it?" His eyes were gleaming. "You can make your own. There are empty factories all over the country, especially in the South. There are still a lot of workers around with the necessary skills. They may be a bit on the older side, but that could work for us. There are all kinds of government incentives to hire older workers. Think about it." I did, for about 30 seconds. "If I'm guessing right, you've got everything researched already. Get me a hard cost analysis, and we'll put it to a vote." We looked at the numbers. It would cost about 75 cents more per shirt to make them. Gail said no immediately. Barry didn't think it was a good idea, but both sons and Amy thought it was worth looking into. Ralph was ambivalent, but then decided we could work the Made in America angle and agreed. Debbie had just had her child, my first granddaughter, a month before. She was destined to be the most beautiful girl on the planet. I had her picture on my desk. It kept Debbie from making the trip, so I took Jerry and Amy. Gail didn't want to go. Too busy. I loved the area. It was rural but 40 miles from the biggest city in the state. I was saddened by the rows of empty buildings, once bustling manufacturing centers. The unemployment rate was staggering. The county, state, and federal governments were offering grants and incentives to lure us there. We had already visited 2 states, and nothing appealed to me more than this area. We found one mid-sized building that was perfect. It was a shirt factory back in the 90s, and some of the equipment was still in the building. It was outdated and would have to be replaced, but it spoke of history. We brought our findings back, and Gail fought tooth and nail. "We need to concentrate on our core business. You know, our profits would almost double if we were to move the operation to China. Something we need to consider." I was furious. "It's not just about the money. This company will never move out of the country. It's a pride thing." It steamed her, but I still owned 65%, so there wasn't a lot she could do. Jerry brought up another point I hadn't considered while I was having dinner with his family. "You know, even though they'll be sewn here, the fabric will still come from China." I hadn't thought of that. "You wouldn't throw that tidbit out without an alternative. Spit it out." He grinned. "Got a cloth plant already lined up. The product will be 100% American. They'll have to add 120 people over a year to meet our needs as we transition over. If we guarantee them a 2-year renewable contract, it's 40 minutes from the sewing plant, so transport costs will be minimal. One drawback, it'll add about 50 cents per shirt to manufacture. Can you absorb that and still make a profit? I had to think on it. Together with the sewing plant, it raised the cost to $1.25 more than buying the shirts outright. I talked to Ralph and Amy. They thought it was doable. We can raise the price if we have to. See if the market will bear it. You're pretty established now, and it will be a higher quality product. Gail objected again. She was buying all her denim from Malaysia for a fraction of what it would cost domestically. Her projected profit margins were impressive, and we were starting to disagree on just about everything. I took a close look at her. She was almost 24 now and wore designer fashions, expensive jewelry, and used a high-end stylist for her hair and makeup. She looked different than before, and I suspected she had undergone some cosmetic procedures. Her company car was a Lexus, and by our in-house estimates, she was worth about $2 million now. Money had definitely clouded her vision. Since Debbie did a lot of errands for me, I had given her my company SUV and drove my truck to work. Ralph had chosen the same model SUV, saying we could get a better deal if we got two. Amy called me. She had taken over human resources when the woman we hired originally got caught in a drug sting. She was my age minus 53, and we didn't see that coming. Amy had the right training and degrees, so she was the logical choice. She had her hands full between the sewing plant, the jeans plant, and the monogramming operations. We now had 225 hourly workers and 40 salaried employees. It was time to get a health plan. She wanted me to come down to the sewing plant. She had been there for 6 weeks, staffing the plant and interviewing salary personnel. They were set to produce their first shirts the next week. They were still only half-staffed, but she was working on it as hard as she could. I arrived on Friday, planning to spend the weekend reviewing progress with Amy and watching the operation Monday. She picked me up at the airport, giving me a big hug and grinning. I sat and reflected as she drove. It had been 4 years since Cathy and I had split, and 3 years since we had started the company. I hadn't dated in almost 2 years and hadn't had a romantic relationship even longer. It just never seemed to happen. I looked at Amy with appreciation. I needed to change that. She caught me looking at her and grinned. "What are you doing?" I knew I was blushing. I decided to be honest. "Enjoying the scenery." She grinned wider and took a deep breath, playfully straining the buttons on her blouse. "Good. Some of us thought you might be gay." She was still laughing when we pulled into the parking lot. It was filled with cars, and tents had been set up across the grounds. "What's going on?" "You'll see. Come on." She led me by the hand to the tent. I could see the grounds were covered with people of all ages, kids running everywhere, and cookers going in the back. I guessed now why she scheduled a mid-afternoon flight for me. Picking up a microphone, she called for everyone's attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, gather around. Welcome to the first annual company picnic. Now I want you to meet the man responsible for this get-together. Everyone, this is Zach Bivens, founder and CEO of the Redneck Chic Clothing Company, your boss." I looked around and saw my sons and family. Ralph, Barry, everyone but Gail. Everyone was clapping. I was humbled. I didn't make a speech. Instead, I made it a point to speak to each and every employee and their families, thanking them for coming to work for us. There was a little ceremony when the oldest lady we hired, a 67-year-old grandmother of 9, presented me with the shirt she had sewn. The very first shirt to come off the line. I took it home, had Mavis monogram it for me, framed it, and hung it on my office wall. Our company was growing by leaps and bounds, and Greg ensured our cash flow and debt load were very comfortable. Mavis and the girls were working on designs for new products we were introducing. Collared shirts, an upgrade from the tees. They even had a new logo, The same raccoon, but larger, with a tail that came halfway down the shirt. Dubbed the long tail line. It showed great promise. We were also looking at offering jackets with an even larger logo. Just for fun, Mavis made a stuffed toy raccoon, wings and all, for her 3-year-old granddaughter. I saw it one Friday afternoon when I had reached my stress limit and decided to take half a day off. Rare for me. I always stopped to say hi to the girls and saw the toy lying on her desk. She grumbled because she didn't get to sew as much anymore, but took great pride in her job. She had turned 65 the month before, and I asked when she planned on retiring. When you run me out of here, I'm happier right now than I've ever been in my life. I'll always be grateful for the chance you've given me. She hugged me hard, and the emotion almost overwhelmed me. Well, if that's the case, you'll probably outlast me. I was enthralled by the stuffed toy. I had Mavis make one for my new granddaughter. It became her favorite toy. She slept with it until she was 5, and then retired it to a shelf, refusing to get rid of it. She even made one for me that I kept on my desk at work. I looked at it off and on for about a year before the idea that had been nibbling at my consciousness finally gelled. You couldn't find a company that made stuffed animals in the U.S. anymore. They were mostly Chinese manufactured. I put Jerry on it. A month later, he came back with a plan. There was a small building near the shirt factory, and he had lined up the specialized equipment used at a good price. I told him to run with it. It took 5 months to set the place up. It only had 14 employees to start. The old machines weren't very fast, but made a high-quality product. Gail had a fit, thinking it was a waste of money. The jeans had taken off, and she was producing at capacity on 2 shifts, adding equipment and sewers until she didn't have any more room in her building. To keep the peace, I had Barry set it up so the stuffed animal plant was completely autonomous, owned solely by me, and manufacturing under the license of Redneck Chic. That seemed to placate her. Since Mavis designed the stuffed animal, I gave her 25 cents for every toy sold. The quarterly checks were almost as much as her salary. I hardly saw Gail now, except for staff meetings. She had her office at the jeans plant, and spent most of her time there. Greg told me she had a new boyfriend, and it looked serious. He didn't think much of him. We worked out a deal with Will Turner and his wife to do some endorsements for us. His racing career was doing well, and he had won 2 races so far. I really liked his wife. She was open and friendly. She was a bit reluctant at first. You're admittedly marketing towards rednecks. Do you really think a black couple is a good choice? I laughed. You've never met a black redneck. Racing is racing, and everybody loves a winner. You're perfect, the wife of a race car driver and a plus-size woman. That's the market we target. We sent her several pairs of jeans and a dozen shirts and caps. She called back the next week. I'm sold. They fit great. They're American-made, and they're good quality. What do you want me to do? She and Alice, the woman from school and our original model, became our spokesmodels. Will took a few cases of the shirts and hats with him to the track. After his crew was taken care of, he gave the rest away to other drivers and friends. He launched our long tail line, appearing in print ads and racing magazines with his wife, while Alice mostly did farm magazines and publications like Good Housekeeping. Sales dropped slightly when we went all-American and raised the price by $2 a shirt. I went on the internet, on YouTube, and our website, and explained why the price went up. We showed group photos of all our plants. Then I apologized for the price increase, explaining why. I said something that became a catchphrase for a lot of people. How much is your country worth to you? Sales picked back up and kept growing. The little stuffed raccoons became really hot. I got Amy, Will, Mary Alice, and Debbie to accompany us down to the animal factory, as it got dubbed. We rented a little trailer and stuffed it with raccoons. We went to the sewing factory and the cloth plant, giving each employee an animal. Then we went back, loaded up again, and made trips to local hospitals, giving each sick child one. It went over so well that we had 2 truckloads delivered and had volunteers from our factories deliver them to all the hospitals in their area. We usually kept a low profile, but ESPN was doing segments on up-and-coming stars, and they caught up to Will as he was handing out the animals and signing autographs at a hospital. They dubbed him the Raccoon Fairy, a nickname the other drivers teased him about mercilessly. He even had one of the stuffed raccoons sitting on his dashboard, and people got to see it every time the dashcam was used. You wouldn't believe how expensive even a partial sponsorship in the Bush series is. It took us a long time to decide to do it, but the rewards were tremendous. The raccoon really did get painted on his hood, which gave him a huge fan base among children. He always had a box or 2 of the stuffed animals around to give out to fans, young and old alike. The stuffed animals became a fad, and the little factory couldn't keep up. So we bought more machines and doubled production. Our company was outgrowing us again, and I was back to 16-hour days, no social life to speak of, and a lot of stress. It came to a head when I collapsed after a week of less than 4 hours of sleep each night. My doctor gave me a hard time. You need to exercise and relax. What good is being rich to you if you're dead? I have some words I want you to integrate into your vocabulary. Exercise, relaxation, delegation. You're working your way up to a heart attack or stroke if you keep going. The boys, Debbie and Jerry's girlfriend, Maria, were in the room with me later. Ralph, Barry, and Amy were waiting to get in. I had a feeling Maria was prime daughter-in-law material, and about all Jerry could get out while she was around was "yes, dear." I loved it. Debbie and Maria raked me over the coals. Debbie told me I needed to live at least long enough to meet my grandson, due in 6.5 months. Maria whispered in my ear that he wouldn't be the only new arrival in the next 7 months, holding up her hand to show me the ring. You've got a lot to live for, old man. They talked it over and decided what I needed was a woman, specifically a wife. Someone who'll keep you alive long enough to nag you to death, was how they put it. Amy was peeking in by then, so they left the room. Ralph and Barry gave me a hard time about lying down on the job and told me in no uncertain terms I was allowed to work half days after 2 weeks off for the indefinite future. What really surprised me was the way Amy acted, crying all over me. You're in a hole. Think about how many people depend on you. It was all I could do to keep the management of the shirt plant from coming up here. I had to stop most of the locals from flooding the waiting rooms. Mavis is out there and refuses to go home until she sees you. You have no idea what you mean to these people. If she wanted to shame me, she succeeded. Mavis hugged me so hard I almost lost my breath, crying like a baby. I had to swear on the lives of my grandchildren, present and to come, that I would take care of myself. Amy put a note for me on all the bulletin boards asking them not to send any more flowers. The room was full, and I was sending the overflow to the children's ward. They kept me 3 days. I went by the office after I got discharged, and production stopped instantly. I don't think I've ever been hugged so much. Not surprising, since 80% of our workforce was female. Amy decided I wasn't smart or capable enough to take care of myself, so she and Mavis worked out a schedule. I would work until lunchtime at the office, and then go home to rest and relax. Mavis would pop in every hour or so to make sure I wasn't working. Amy got into the habit of eating lunch with me to make sure you actually eat something healthy. My double Whopper addiction was well documented, but I could sneak one in every week or so if they weren't watching too closely. I came to enjoy the lunches tremendously. Sometimes we would eat with the women in our experimental shop, but most times we were alone at the kitchen table. I actually started enjoying salads. Despite working together all this time, we never really got to know each other. We were always too busy. I told her about my marriages and how they both collapsed due to infidelity. I was surprised at her response. I despise cheaters with a passion. I was married before, just once. I still remember how devastated I was the first time I caught him. When I caught him the second time, he was history. I cried for days. Anyway, it didn't seem to upset her that much. My cousin told me his third marriage just ended due to his cheating again. I'm glad to be rid of him, she said. She had divorced him 6 years ago. I asked if she had anyone now, and she laughed. I don't have time for a relationship. My boss is a slave driver. If he didn't pay me so much money, I would have left a long time ago, she said with a grin, letting me know she was kidding. How come you don't have a relationship? I asked her back. I don't have time. Somebody has to crack the whip, or the slaves revolt, she said, laughing now. Besides, I said, I'm getting picky with my age. I often thought I would never marry again, but lately, I've been rethinking it. Just because I failed the first 2 times doesn't mean there aren't still good women out there. The law of averages says I eventually have to get it right. The look in her eyes changed, but before I could figure it out, she changed the subject. Gail is making noise about moving the jean shop to China again. I think she's trying to take advantage of your diminished presence. She spends a lot more time at the main office, and I know she has lunch with Barry once a week. There's not really much she can do because she's a minority owner, I replied. She's engaged now. I don't think much of him, I grunted. Why would she want to move? Is the money really that important? She has to be worth a few million now. She feels frustrated, Zach. Remember, she wanted to be a fashion designer, but for the last few years, she's had to be a business owner. And that came first. Plus, she has always held a bit of resentment towards you for not going 50-50 when you set up the business. I was surprised. When I had Barry help me set up the business structure, Barry suggested only 25%. I came up with the concept, the name of the company, and all the money. She helped, but a lot of the groundwork was done by me. I was generous, giving her 35%. Part of the deal was she handled designs, something she hasn't done much of. Maybe it's time to part ways. Amy looked surprised. Gail was her niece after all. I don't think that's a good idea. She needs your guidance. To be honest, I don't think she would do nearly as well on her own. I grunted, just talking. But tell her to relay this message. No company of mine is going to China or anywhere else. We're making good money. 300 Americans directly depend on us for their livelihood. That doesn't even account for the jobs of suppliers that we use. Tell her that. But if she pushes it, you need to do what's best for the company. She was holding my hand by then, and I was surprised how good it felt. She realized what she was doing and released her grip, sliding back a bit. We promoted Jerry to help handle day-to-day operations. Ralph took over some of my duties. Since I was on half-days and couldn't keep Debbie busy, she became his assistant. I knew something was off when Greg called and told me he wanted me to come by for lunch Sunday. Maria and Debbie were both getting heavier. Debbie was 7.5 months along, and Maria, 5.5. The Bivens clan was really starting to band together. Maria, of course, had come to work with us. She was invaluable with our Hispanic workers. She was the floor manager in charge of 25 workers, and her production was always higher than the other 3 sections, a source of great pride to her. It was a solemn meal. I held out for as long as I could. All right, what the hell has got you guys looking like somebody ran over your dog? Somebody better start talking. The girls got up and left, leaving me with the boys. They hemmed and hawed before finally coming out with what was on their minds. Dad, Mom is in bad shape. She got downsized and caught her new husband cheating. She's a wreck. Her house is in foreclosure. Can we help her? I eyed them, not liking what I was thinking to help. Greg took the lead. Jerry and I found her a nice little apartment in a good building. We'll pay for the first year, including utilities. Jerry is putting her on his phone plan. He paused for a breath, and Jerry jumped in. She needs a job, Dad, something to occupy her and give her some money. She needs to be able to stand on her own in a year. I really didn't like where this was going. I suppose you boys got a plan for her being gainfully employed. Spit it out. Gail needs a new assistant. Her old one quit the other day. didn't say why, and refused an exit interview with Amy. Everybody knows what a challenge Gail can be. We figure with her being your ex-wife and our mother, she'd be a little more polite. It works out well for all of us. Plus, she'd be in the factory most of the time. You'll never see her, except maybe for weekly staff meetings. It would mean a lot to us. This sucked. Rosalind was my first wife. Hell, I was over her. I'd gotten married and divorced again since I had been with her, and I still didn't need old wounds opened. But she was their mother, and she did need help. They were literally holding their breath. All right, she is your mother, but you guys need to keep her away from me, else I will ensure she is out and back on the streets. So we'll go along with the deal for now, but I want to make sure she understands that and stays away from me. They were both smiling. You got it, Hop. You won't even know she's here. The girls came in and hugged me. We knew you would go along. You're a good man, Maria said, smiling that bright smile. It was easy to see why Jerry loved her so much. Debbie whispered in my ear, "Thank you, thank you, thank you." At one point, they wanted to move her in with us. We both knew how that would end. Debbie didn't like Rosalind much, never had, and never bothered to hide it. It made me love her more. I told Amy about it at lunch Tuesday. She didn't seem pleased. "Are you sure about this? I don't think you need any more stress in your life right now. They'll make the best of it. She is the mother of my children, after all. I'll still have to put up with her. Besides, I gave her to Gail. It's not like she's on the gravy train. She'll earn every dime she gets." Amy actually laughed. Gail didn't take it very well. It took all my HR skills to get her to listen to reason, but I talked to her yesterday, and she had settled down a bit. Rosalind arrived the next week and immediately started complaining. Her apartment was too small, the commute was too long, and she didn't like Gail. Other than that, things were perfect. Greg and Jerry had had a little talk with her. "We're doing the best we can, Mom. If you don't like the apartment, find one you like. Just know, if you do move out of here, you have to pay your own rent. Gail can be abrasive, we know, but we're hoping you'll be a good influence on her. If it bothers you too much, feel free to find another job. We'll help you look." That shut her up. She knew she couldn't find another job that paid as well, and the thought of paying her own living expenses didn't sit well. I saw her for the first time 2 weeks later at our weekly meeting. She had put on a few pounds, her hair was shorter and a different color, but she still had those striking blue eyes. She spoke first. "Zach, how are you?" "Oh, I'm just fine, Rose. How have you been?" I saw her eyes tighten. She had never liked me calling her Rose. She took 2 deep breaths to relax. "I've seen better days. Thank you for your help. I appreciate it, and I know the boys do. So how do you like being a business owner?" "Quite a bit different from what we envisioned all those years ago. Then again, I didn't expect to have a crowd of grandkids either. I can't wait to see our grandsons." I actually smiled. Maybe she'd changed. Before I could answer, Amy came over and put her hand on my arm. Something went on between them. Some mental tension I couldn't quite understand. I wasn't sure I wanted to. "Time to start the meeting, Zach. Don't let it run too long. I want to try that new Mexican place on 5th for lunch." Rosalind sat, and I saw her tense up. I tried to diffuse the situation. "She's right. Time to get down to business. I'll talk to you Sunday over lunch at Jerry's house." When I said that, Amy gripped my arm a lot tighter. I don't think she realized it. Now, being a man, I am, of course, clueless when it comes to women, but experience had taught me a little. Was Amy jealous? Why would she be? Definitely food for thought. She caught me looking at her a few times over lunch. "What? Do I have food on my blouse?" "No. I have a few questions, mostly non-business. We still contribute to the GU Center, don't we? If we do, can you get me 2 tickets to see Jersey Boys? I've always wanted to see it, and this is supposed to be the best touring company in America." She thought for a minute. "I'm sure I could arrange something." "Great. Now for a business question. If I take, say, an employee as a date, what kind of trouble could I get in? She stopped eating and stared at me with a concerned expression on her face. I wouldn't advise it. If you have a relationship with an employee and it ends badly, you could open yourself up to all kinds of litigation. Don't fish in the company pond. Zach. I tried my best to look sad. Too bad. I was really hoping you'd go with me. I know how much you enjoy musicals. Never mind. Then, she actually choked on her tea. When she recovered, she saw me grinning. Ha! What's going to happen is you will pick me up at 6, and we're going to a really nice restaurant that I will pick. Then, strictly as two officers of a corporation that helps fund the center, we will attend the performance just to show our support. This will be a public relations function for your business, and will in no way be considered a date. Do you understand? So, I take it that's a yes. Of course. Now eat your lunch, and if you touch that salt shaker, I'll be hard-pressed to applaud Friday with a broken hand. I sent her flowers Friday morning. The card read, "In appreciation of a loyal employee. Strictly business, of course." Debbie got wind of the flowers and was in my office within 45 minutes. "So, Amy? Flowers? You romantic dog." I tried to brush it off. "Just a gesture of appreciation. Don't make a big deal out of it." She was about to say something when Maria came charging into the office. She looked at Debbie, who nodded. Then she turned to me, grinning. "Well, Pop, just thought I'd tell you, don't try to get hold of her. She took a half-day of vacation. So did I. So did Maria. We're all going for a spa treatment followed by a little shopping. You better appreciate this." I held up my hands. "Now, just a minute." Maria cut me off. "Give it up, Pop. I shouldn't tell you this, but she's had feelings for you for about a year. She nearly collapsed when you got sick. Men really are clueless, and I've seen you look at her when she's not looking. You want her just as bad." Debbie jumped back in. "Don't you dare screw this up. If you do, lunch will be served very cold on Sunday. Whether you know it or not, you need her, and she needs you. We could use a new mother-in-law. The one we have now is not that great." I gave up. "Anything else I need to know?" Maria looked at her watch. "Yeah. Greg and Jerry will be by in about 20 minutes to take you shopping. When was the last time you got a new suit? Come on, Pop. You'll like the results. And I know you plan to drive your truck. Big no-no. The limo will pick you up at 6. Good thing you're rich. This date is going to cost you a bundle. You're welcome. Dan. Parents are so hard to raise, aren't they?" she said, trying to hold in the laughter. "Yes, but they're so cute at that age, aren't they?" Greg and Jerry caught the last of the conversation, and my office rang with laughter from everyone but me. I just glowered. "Give it up, Pop. Make life easy on all of us. Now let's get you a new suit that actually looks like it came from this decade." I sat in the back of the limo, feeling like a 15-year-old being driven by his mom to his first date. I was way out of practice. Normally a pretty self-possessed person, I felt completely out of my element. I had never been to her house and admired the groomed lawn and carefully placed flower beds. It looked neat, attractive, and beautiful. When she opened the door, I knew I should have said something, but all I could do was gawk. She wore a perfect little black dress that was conservative yet classy. It molded to her figure elegantly, and her hair was styled perfectly. She let me squirm for a couple of minutes before blushing. "For God's sake, Zach, say something." Knowing honesty was the best policy, I finally managed to blur out, "You're so beautiful." She flushed deeply, then giggled. "Thank you. I'm glad to know the efforts of your daughters-in-law weren't in vain. I feel like a princess." I finally recovered. "They just got upgraded in the will. I'll say it again. You're beautiful. Now, princess, your carriage awaits." She wrapped a shawl over her shoulders and linked her arm through mine, and we were off. We went to the new Thai restaurant near the center. Amy loved spicy food, as did I. but my stomach didn't. She ordered 2 sample platters, 1 spicy and 1 mild. She gave me small bites occasionally, and as I wiped my brow, I wondered how she could stand it. We were a block away from the venue, and it was a warm night, so we strolled over. I was getting very used to the feel of her hand on my arm. The performance was very good. We were in a box, some of the best seats in the house. Her hand was in mine, and I don't think she let go the whole performance. "Thank you so much for tonight. I really loved the show," she said. "I was sad to see it end too," I admitted. She stopped dead on the sidewalk. "Who said it was over? I plan on keeping you out past your bedtime. If you're very nice and very lucky, I may tuck you in." I flushed red again, and she laughed. Boy, did I like that sound. She gave an address to the driver, and in due course, he delivered us to a club that catered to our age. They had a Beatles tribute band playing. Quite good. They even wore the suits and had the iconic hairstyles. "Order us a pitcher of something light, darling," she said. "Excuse me for just a second while I powder my nose." She came back 5 minutes later, her hair down for the first time I had ever seen it. I couldn't believe how long it was. We sipped our drinks and listened to the band while she seemed a bit restless in her seat. I wasn't great at dancing, but I wanted to please her. Want to dance. I got up before she dragged me onto the floor. For the first time in my life, I understood the expression, poetry in motion. As foolish as I felt, the slow dances made up for it. She moved close to me, and her heels put her at the perfect height. We took breaks occasionally, so I could catch my breath. She took pity on my condition, and just danced the slow ones for a while. A friend and her husband stopped by to say hello. I had noticed them, an attractive couple who really knew how to dance. We invited them to sit, and I got them a round of drinks. Their names were Jerry and Sky. When the band started Twist and Shout, Amy started to squirm. Sky was complaining about some ankle pain and didn't want to move for a while, so I got Jerry's attention. "Would you do me a favor and dance with Amy? I'm recovering from a health issue, and Sky wants to sit this one out." Amy looked at me, and I nodded. They were on the floor in a second. I watched her enjoying herself, happy that she was having fun. They stayed on the floor for 2 more fast songs, but when a slow one started, they came back to us. "Thank you. Most men I'm with get jealous if I dance with others," she said. "They're your friends. I'm still learning, and Jerry's a great dancer. I want you to enjoy yourself." I paused. "But if he had been a stranger, I would expect you to say no. If you're with me, you're with me. Understand?" She giggled in my ear. "I'm with you, honey." Well, that could be interpreted in many ways. We had coffee with them when the club closed, and I praised their dancing skills. Sky smiled and handed me a card. "We own a dance studio. Before we left, we were signed up for lessons." "I don't think you need lessons," I told her in the limo. "I used to be a part-time instructor when I was younger. It can't hurt to brush up on my skills. Plus, if you're with the same partner all the time, it makes you both better. It'll get you in shape, and it beats the heck out of bowling." I didn't mess things up on the way home. After I walked her to her door, I got several very nice goodnight kisses. It was enough for now. Of course, I got the 3rd-degree sundae before Rose arrived. There were a lot of ooh and ah from the girls. The guys just wanted to know if I had a good time. Their wives playfully pummeled them while laughing. Rose came in and saw the smiles. Well, it's nice to see everyone smiling. Anything special to spark it. Jerry laughed. Pop went on his first date in over 2 years. Apparently, he had a really good time. It was a little white lie, and everyone knew it, but nobody corrected it. For some reason, Rosalind didn't find it funny, and her presence put a damper on the proceedings for a while. It only lightened up when Ash, their 2-year-old, woke up from her nap. Debbie brought her in, still clutching her raccoon toy, her comfort object. Rosalind commented on how cute Ashley was and how the toy looked familiar. It's our company logo, Mom, Jerry explained. We manufacture them at a facility near our shirt factory. We sell them online and in certain retailers that carry a lot of our clothing. We've sold quite a few. She rolled her eyes. Great, something else to swell your coffers. This offended Jerry greatly. The toy line was his project, and he was proud of it. Well, Mom, so far, we've sold over 500,000 at a profit of $1.50 each. It isn't part of Pop's other businesses. It's a standalone charitable foundation. Every dime after expenses goes to the Wounded Warrior Foundation to help disabled veterans resume a normal life. They build ramps, make houses handicap-friendly, pay for guide dogs, private counseling, anything that can make it easier for them to live normal lives. I wish he hadn't told her that. We didn't do it for publicity. We did it because we wanted to. Jerry's best friend lost both legs to an IED in Afghanistan, and it shook Jerry to see how hard his life was. He came to me to see if we could help, and we built ramps for his house. It got me thinking. I really didn't need the money as much as they did. Gail had insisted I make it a separate business, so she wasn't losing anything. Bob, his friend, went to school and finished his accounting degree, and we hired him the day he graduated. Part of his duties was to oversee the donations. I liked him, but he made me nervous, not because of his disabilities, but because he kept thanking me. Rosalind was suitably chastised and apologized. All told, it wasn't a bad afternoon, compared to, say, a root canal. Monday morning, I got an email with a detailed list of functions I would be attending to represent the company. It looked like my Fridays and Saturdays were going to be tied up for a while. I was still going home at lunchtime. I liked it and was seriously considering making it permanent. Amy had lunch at the house with me and Mavis and didn't mention the past week. She did ask if I got the memo about more community involvement, to which I assured her I did, and it sounded like an excellent idea. Mavis was a pretty sharp old bird, and when Amy kissed me goodbye and called me honey, her eyes got huge. Amy didn't have her car door shut before she was on me. So, you and Amy. About time. You're too good a man to be single. You need someone to love you, and she does. I held up my hands. Whoa, we're just friends. Nobody has marriage in mind. She just looked at me with her hands on her hips. Aha, if you say so. Well, when this wedding that nobody is talking about happens, I expect to be sitting on the groom's side of the church. I just looked at her as she walked back to the shop, smiling. Mavis told me she and the girls were working on something, but they would only tell me when it was ready. She made sure Annie was with me Friday at lunch. I knew something was in the wind. They had been whispering and giggling for days. Mavis asked me to come into the shop after lunch. All the girls were grinning when we came in. You told us to experiment, and we did, said Mavis. Get ready for a fashion show. Bring them out, girls. It was mostly grandchildren, ranging from 8 months old to 6 years, all wearing bright clothes with our logo. I had often thought about launching a children's line, but never had the time to develop it. Mavis beat me to it. I was really impressed. When I looked closely at the logo on the jumper of the 8-month-old, I noticed it was wearing a diaper. One 6-year-old had a dress on that featured a mother raccoon with 4 juveniles behind her. Debbie was there with Ashley, who had on a little pair of red overalls, with 2 raccoon heads sticking out of the bib. Baby Raccoon was introduced on the internet with a limited run, and we sold out in 2 weeks. Everyone was happy. Except Gail. She stormed into my house while Amy and I were having lunch. I'm supposed to be the designer here, she ranted. We sat there with our mouths hanging open. I tried to be reasonable. Nobody is undermining you here, Gail. If you remember, I asked you 2 years ago about a kids' line. You wanted to concentrate on your fashion line. You got it up and running. Now design to your heart's content. She ranted a little more and then stormed back out. We looked at each other. She's losing it, said Amy. That husband of hers is spending money they don't have on foolish things, and she doesn't know how to say no. He knows she has millions, but he doesn't understand the difference between working millions and spending millions. To top it off, he talked her out of a prenup. I sat up straight, my feet hitting the floor. Is she insane? There's a clause in our partnership agreement stating that if either of us marries, their spouse has to stay away from the business, which was for her own protection. What was she thinking? I knew that Barry was going to have a field day with this. Things progressed nicely between Amy and me. We went to concerts, plays, and sporting events. Anything she could fit into company functions. I wondered how all the romantic movies she made me attend fell into that category, but wisely kept my mouth shut. We had rights to the owner's box during race season. I wasn't much into racing per se, but Amy really seemed to enjoy it. Maria and Alice were almost always there. Jimmy loved racing, and they were often called on to help distribute goodies to the crowd, especially to kids. We had added kid-sized t-shirts, which were a big hit. Will was winning and placing in the top 10 consistently, and the principal owner wanted to jump to NASCAR next year. And we were along for the ride. He was a lock for Rookie of the Year if he kept his pace. We had to add another building of monogramming machines and expand the shirt factory, which meant our cloth supplier had to expand. Forbes magazine did a story on us. We were on the cover. Jerry, Greg, Ralph, Amy, Debbie, Maria, Mavis, and of course, Gail were featured. The caption read, "Grinning like a proud business owner. The story of a true American success." As things got better between Amy and me, they seemed to degenerate between Gail and her new husband. I could see storm clouds on the horizon. We had gone south as a family to attend the shirt factory's annual picnic. The food was excellent, with the meats and side dishes done professionally. The desserts were made by the employees, 80% of whom were women. The competition was fierce, with desserts divided into categories: cakes, pies, cookies, brownies, and another for anything stray that didn't fit anywhere else, like refrigerated items. First prize in each category was $100, second $50, third $25, and the overall winner received $250. And bragging rights, priceless. I knew better than to be on the panel of judges, so we invited the local mayor and county commissioners and pressed them into being judges, along with a half-dozen employees chosen at random. We enjoyed the games for the children. Ashley was old enough to participate for the first time. Horse shows, badminton, and other games were played by the adults. It took 3 hours during the festivities to judge the desserts, and the winners were announced at the end of the night. The cash was awarded, and the grand prize was a coconut cake made with freshly shredded coconut. The woman in her 40s cried with joy. And they all got their pictures in the local papers along with the politicians. Of course, there were more pictures of the event highlighting local people. There was a couple of Amy and me goofing around. In the first, I had just shoved a piece of coconut cake into her mouth, smearing the icing all over her face. In the second, they captured her playful revenge as she leaned in to give me a big kiss while rubbing icing all over my face. The photo identified us as the principal owner of the company and his wife. The kids got a real kick out of it. I got a surprise when we went to check into our hotel. We had gone straight from the plane to the event, and when we got our key cards, they handed one to me and one to Amy, with the same number. Before I could object, she thanked the clerk and hurried me off while the kids snickered. I got tired of waiting. If it were up to you, you wouldn't make a move until we were in walkers. Now be quiet, and don't screw this up. It had been a long, dry spell. As I mentioned before, Amy tried to catch me up in one night. I was 55, and she only got 2 performances out of me. 3 if you count the one that happened at 6:00 a.m. I was glad she made me take those dance lessons. It got me into better shape. Both my former wives were pale shadows compared to Amy. I had never had a partner so invested in our relationship like she was. At 50, she was still trim and beautiful. She made me wait in the living room of our suite while she changed. I wasn't sure why it took so long. She finally emerged in a stylish outfit that accentuated her figure and high heels. She twirled, enjoying the sight of my surprised expression. "Do you like this on me?" By the time I regained my ability to speak, she was sitting close to me. We shared a kiss and enjoyed each other's company for a few moments before I drew back. "I can think of only one thing that would make this look even better," I said. She raised an eyebrow, a questioning look in her eyes. Before I could continue, I laughed and said, "As good as it looks on you, it would look even better off you." She giggled, replying, "Well, I did all the work putting it on, so it's only fair you take it off of me." I was all about being fair. We enjoyed our time together, and once we were done, I saw her panting. I held her close, refusing to let her move until she fell asleep. At 7 o'clock the next morning, I awoke to her smiling back at me. We took a shower together and made it to the dining room just in time to have breakfast with the family. Debbie grinned and told Amy she was glowing, while Greg told me I looked tired. They all giggled and snickered at my expense for the rest of the meal, while she just smiled. I surprised them by announcing we were staying down for a few more days. I wanted to visit the toy factory and the cloth plant. Mostly, what I wanted was to get Amy back in bed. I'm proud to say I accomplished my goal. We didn't talk about the future until we were on the plane home. I didn't dance around the topic. "So, how long do you think it will take you to close out your apartment before you move in?" She took my hand. "I intend to spend a lot of time in your bed, but I'm not moving in right away. We need to get comfortable and make sure there are no little quirks that will drive us apart. Just so you know, while I'd love to live with you, I'm an old-fashioned marriage kind of woman. Does that scare you?" I took her hand. "The only thing I'm afraid of is that I'm not the one you want. I'll be more than happy to live with the rest." It must have been the right answer because she never let go of my hand for the rest of the flight. I was miserable the first night at home after spending 4 nights with Amy. I would wake up reaching for her until I remembered she wasn't there. The next day, we struggled through lunch with Mavis. She looked back and forth between us before breaking into a grin. We were in the bedroom before the door closed behind her. Later, as we cuddled, she told me she would be back with a suitcase later, just so I'd have a change of clothes if I decided to stay over. She went back to her apartment a week later to get more clothes. Everyone was happy with our relationship, except for 2 people, Gail and Rosalind. I was surprised when Rosalind showed up at my office just as I was going to lunch. "Can we talk?" I glanced at my watch. "I'm due somewhere in just a bit, but if it won't take long, I'll wait." She sat and fidgeted for a few minutes before I finally spoke. "You're running out of time, Rose. Spit it out, or I'm leaving." She took a deep breath, drawing my eye to her outfit, which was quite revealing for work. I could almost see the top of her stockings, and I got a really bad feeling. We were good for each other for a lot of years, weren't we? Right up until I did something foolish. "You've changed. I've changed. Do you think we might?" I stopped her. "Am I stupid? You mean having an affair with your boss for a year before you got caught and telling your friends I was a no-talent loser who would never amount to much? How much better he was." I paused for a moment, then continued. "If I hadn't threatened to file suit against your company and get you both fired, you would have succeeded. Or how you tried to flaunt your new husband in my face, bragging about the money he made and how happy you were." I eased off a bit. "I'm not sorry your life didn't turn out like you hoped for, Rosalind. Honestly, you deserved it. But too much water has flowed under the bridge, and we can't go back. You're still attractive, you have a decent job now, and you're close to your children. Count your blessings and don't push your luck." Before I could say more, the door flew open, and Amy walked in. She regarded Rosalind coolly for a moment before turning to me. "Lunchtime, honey. Do you want Mexican, or should we just have a salad and save the Mexican for dinner? I'll have it delivered to the house so we can relax." "Sound good." Rosalind sat with her mouth hanging open, and I have to admit, I enjoyed the look on her face. I rose, taking Amy by the hand. Rose and I were just talking about old times, and I was about to tell her how bright my future is. But that can wait for another time. See you Sunday. We were out the door before she could recover. Amy saw the look in my eyes at lunch. What? Everybody knows we're together. Your door wasn't shut before I knew it. She was in your office. She needs to learn I don't share my toys. If she thinks that, she needs to find another sandbox. I protect what's mine. My face almost disappeared under my smile. Am I yours? Her face softened. Yes, you're mine. You have been since you were in the hospital, and I realized I was falling in love with you. Can you handle that? I doubt it. You're way out of my league, but that won't stop me from trying. It might take me years to get it right, but I'll never stop trying to make you happy. She jumped up and ran to the restroom, tears flowing down her cheeks. Apparently, I had messed up again. The kiss she gave me when she got back told me I was still doing something right. I was seriously looking for the perfect ring while she was talking about changing drapes and carpets. I told her anything she wanted was fine with me as long as she left my office alone. She was happy, and I was very happy. What could possibly screw that up? I was in my office 2 weeks later, looking at honeymoon brochures, when my secretary called. Boss, there's a lady here to see you. Who is she? Does she have an appointment? No appointment. She says she's your wife. I wondered who the heck it was. Everyone knew Rosalind by now. And Amy hadn't said yes yet. I thought it might be a joke. I nearly fell out of my chair when Cathy walked in. Hi, Zach. Surprised to see me? She asked, smiling and dressed to impress. Why are you here? I asked, more curious than anything else. The smile left her face. I'd like to start by saying I'm sorry. Remember what I said in my letter? I admitted I never read past the first line. Why didn't you read it? She asked, her voice cracking. I decided to be honest. Because I was in too much pain. After Rosalind, when I found you. It made me believe in love again. For 6 years, I thought you were mine alone. Then I find out you've been doing things for profit for almost a year. For what? To make your sale and get your commission. You know what a lot of people call a woman who does that. She struggled to hold her temper. Whatever she wanted, she must have wanted it badly. I decided to keep the conversation brief. What do you want, Cathy? She hung her head and broke. I sold the house to keep my business going. But I lost it anyway. I know you didn't tell, but word got out about what I had been doing. All I got was perverts wanting to sample the incentives I was giving. I lost my listings, then my business. No one in town would let me near their offices. I wasn't run out of town, but it was close. She slumped into a chair. When I said I was broke, I mean really broke. It took the last of my money to get here and rent a room for 3 days. Help me, please. If I ever meant anything to you, I don't want much, and I won't stay here. But I need enough to last a few months. I've got a friend on the West Coast who said she could maybe find me a physician. While a small part of me enjoyed seeing her broken and begging, a bigger part felt compassion and regret. I leaned back in my chair, then got out my checkbook. This is all I'll give you for the good part of our lives. And you do have to leave town soon. I really hope you have a good life. I couldn't enjoy mine more. I'm going to propose to my girlfriend today. She's a good woman, and I love her with more passion than I ever believed possible. When I look back, I'll try to remember the good times and believe what you did was done in desperation and clouded judgment. Her eyes got big when she saw the check. She tried to thank me, but I cut her off. Just take the money. I won't miss it. Even I don't believe how much I have now, and I owe it all to you. If you hadn't betrayed me, I would have never moved here, met the people who helped me get started, and steered me to success. She stopped sniffling. Could I please have a goodbye hug? I thought about it. No, don't make me explain why. You wouldn't like it. The door opened without a knock, and Amy strolled in. Hi, honey. I just need. She saw Cathy. Sorry, Honey, it can wait. I caught her hand as she turned. No, it won't. Miss Myers, I made her take back her maiden name, was just leaving. I turned my hand on Amy's waist. Good luck, Miss Myers, on your future endeavors. Please excuse me. My secretary will show you out. I walked out with Amy, enjoying the look on her face. I never saw Cathy again. We turned a corner, and Amy playfully pushed me against the wall, covering my face with passionate kisses. I know who she was, she said. I started explaining, but she put her hand on my lips. Hush, if you don't know by now, I can be really jealous. You're mine, and I don't like trespassers, especially ex-wives. I shook my head. Now goodbye. You must know I have spies everywhere. I trust you completely, honey, but you're a sucker for a sob story. You're too good a man. Thank God you've got me to keep you on the straight and narrow. Now you have something you want to ask me. Well, it wasn't the way I had envisioned it, but I dropped to one knee and pulled out the ring from my pocket. People were walking by. Secretaries and assistants on their way to lunch. Floor managers bringing paperwork in. They all stopped and stared. As you pointed out, I would be lost without you. I think I need a bit more close supervision, and the only way I can get it is to have you with me always. Amy, love of my life. It took me 2 tries to get it right, but I believe I'm now with the woman I was destined to find. Please, baby, marry me. It wasn't the romantic speech I wanted, but I made my point. I think everyone in the hall held their breath as she knelt down to my level. Yes, it was plain, simple, and the word I wanted most to hear in my life. People clapped and cheered, but neither of us cared. We stayed on the floor, sharing the kiss for almost 5 minutes, long enough for the kids to come thundering down the hall. Maria and Debbie pulled Amy up, and they were in a 3-way hug, dancing around in a circle. The boys just stood grinning. Quit smirking and help an old man up, I told them. They pulled me to my feet, and the girls grabbed me while Amy hugged Jerry and Greg. It was all over in about 40 minutes. Mavis called me an hour later. Remember, I sit on your side of the church. I wish I could have seen her face. You're not going to do a lot of sitting. My parents have passed, so you'll have the position of mother of the groom. She couldn't talk anymore, so she hung up. The date was set, and Amy was in my house full time. We had a long talk about the future. I think I'm going to retire. The boys have come along nicely, and Ralph will still be there to guide them. They'll stay CEO, but I'll only step in when they're deadlocked or need advice. If you retire, you retire. All right. Please, honey. She smirked, like I'm going to let you wander around on your own. You'll have a new full-time job, watching over me. Everyone was happy about the engagement except for Gail. She wasn't happy about anything lately. She finally put a halt to her husband's spending ways. She told him he needed to get a job if he wanted play money. He had stopped working the day after they married. He went into a rage and left, pulling every dime he could get his hands on from their accounts. Then he sued for divorce, wanting alimony and half her part of the company. Barry brought up the partnership and corporation paperwork that plainly excluded the business from community property. It was a gray area, but Barry told him plainly he would drag it out for years and that he would be paying his own fees until then if he couldn't get a lawyer to take it on contingency. Barry had a good reputation, and lawyers were leery. In the end, Gail had to pay him $1.5 million to get him to go away. The drawback was that she didn't have the money. She came up to the house and had lunch with Amy and me. I want out of the company. I want to take the Jen's company and the brand. The rest you'll own free and clear. Can we work something out? Amy and I talked it over. She said it wasn't her call, but I reminded her that we were going to be life partners and that every decision we made from here on would affect both of us. We talked to Barry, who got an independent company to come in and value the business. In the end, we split the company as she wanted. She got the Jen's company and retained the Lard Duds label. I had to pay her $2 million cashed to buy out the rest of her stake. Amy tried to convince her to stay with us, but she was adamant. I've learned a lot. It's time for me to move on and follow my own vision. As soon as the ink was dry, she closed the factory and moved the business to China. The locals were devastated. When I found out, I was furious, but there was nothing I could do about her decision. What I could do was buy the equipment and restart it under another name. Amy came up with our new logo, Living Large, with 2 big L's in red on the pocket. We sent out memos and went on our website and YouTube to explain the change. We didn't criticize Gail and didn't say where she went, but word got out regardless. She did well for about 3 years before selling the company to a Chinese syndicate and opening her own design house in Leh. Everyone in the company knew I rewarded innovation and paid for designs. Maria came to me with an idea, and I got her together with Mavis, and magic happened again. Maria had a bunch of 10 to 16-year-old nephews and cousins who had some ideas about our clothing. "Why don't you have designs with skulls or chains?" said one. They called Amy and me into the experimental shop. Mavis was 70 by now and had decided to retire at the end of the year. This was her last effort for the company. Maria had the kids who inspired her idea model for the new punk raccoon line. It wasn't the cute, cuddly logo everyone was familiar with. The raccoon had black, bat-like wings and red eyes, with the wings outlined in silver to give them a skeletal look. We started with hoodies and t-shirts, giving out samples to the first models to get the look out into the community. We married, and I met Amy's son for the first time. He had just graduated college, and of course, we brought him in. It was a family business, after all. Greg took him under his wing, and Jerry helped. Rosalind met a man, and things turned serious. Before we knew it, she was married and moved away. Although the boys would never admit it, they were relieved. Our Sunday dinners developed into quite a gathering. Amy and I didn't work anymore, except for a monthly board meeting. Our honeymoon was a cruise, and we liked it so much we made it an annual event, dragging along the grandkids to give the parents a much-needed break. It's been a good life so far. Oh, and Mavis did retire, for 6 months. Then she called me up. "You know who Ozzy Osbourne is?" she asked. What an odd question from a 70-year-old woman. "Yes, Mavis, I do." "Good, because I'm about to quote him. Retirement sucks. When can I come back to work?" "Just as soon as you can walk through the door." She's still going strong. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.